The mayor of the city of Winnipeg is here. They're going to light the Christmas tree tonight. And in a moment, we'll turn to serious issues. But how are you feeling about that tonight?
Looking forward to it. 5:45 tonight at City Hall. We are lighting the Christmas tree outside of City Hall. Everyone's invited, Marcy. And if Pat could kind of work his magic and provide a little bit of snowfall right around that time, it would just really make the moment.
So don't disappoint the kids, Pat. We're all looking at you, including Mayor Scott Gillingham. No pressure, no pressure. So we actually have, Scott Gillingham, Mr. Mayor, we have some tape to play for you. Because often when you come in for the monthly interview, we cover a range of topics. But right now, a lot of people are talking about this proposal that came through Executive Policy Committee. So no one in the city disputes the idea that we need solutions to our housing crisis. But not everyone agrees to this proposed change to the zoning rules that's on its way. Earlier this week, in case you missed this, the Mayor's Executive Policy Committee voted 5-1 to work to allow construction of fourplexes up to a height of 4 stories anywhere within 800 meters of frequent transit routes. Now, this change, it said, is necessary to access almost $200 million in federal funding. So here are some of the Winnipeggers who weighed in on CBC this week, starting with Lanny McGuinness, President and CEO of the Manitoba Home Builders Association.
Our industry, our associations are very ready to help work on putting together a workable solution to help do this in a way that makes sense for the city of Winnipeg, and it makes sense for land developers who are looking at making investments in these types of projects.
We have essentially a random mix of much taller homes, the new ones that are being built, next to older low homes. And as a result, a lot of the older low homes have big walls now sitting right next to their homes.
Cities grow, change, evolve over time. What this is doing is to say what it can grow and change over time into is expanded a little bit.
These are the type of things that look good on paper, but won't necessarily translate into the type of development that the federal, provincial, or even municipalities are looking for.
So as you heard, there are a lot of people, a lot of different views on this. Aaron Moore, professor in the Department of Political Science, University of Winnipeg. Brian Pincott, former Calgary City Councillor, moved to Winnipeg in 2019. Ray Heslin lives in Glenwood. He's worried about residents' rights to appeal developments. And then we did hear off the top from Lanny McGuinness, President and CEO of the Manitoba Home Builders Association, who worked with the city on the Housing Accelerator Fund application. And so, Mayor Scott Gillingham, I know there's a lot for us to chew on there. Why don't we start with sort of your view on this? So I mentioned that, to access the funding, to get more housing, there's certain stipulations. Can you speak to those in the city who are listening about why you believe this could be the right way forward for our city in terms of building?
Well, first of all, the fund that we have applied to the federal government for is a fund that the feds are rolling out across Canada. Many other cities have made these changes, and the reason we're making the changes is because the federal government, frankly, is imposing them on us. They said if you want access to the funds, you need to make these changes. So the changes that I proposed in the motion that was adopted at Executive Policy Committee are changes that reflect what the federal government is requiring us to do. These are changes to our application. They're not changes to the zoning bylaw yet, because there will be an entire separate process to change the zoning bylaw. And that would require a public hearing. That would open the opportunity for members of the public, other councillors, members of the community to participate in that bylaw hearing process. What is yet to be defined, and we're still working on it, there'd still be rules around it. It wouldn't be the Wild West where you could just build 4 stories anywhere on any lot, because there's still requirements for height and lot size and front yards and side yard setbacks. So there's a lot of work yet to do. But Marcy, as you said off the top, we need housing in this city. We need housing for seniors, for newcomers, for students. We need affordable and deeply affordable housing. We need to build housing. And what I do not want to see is I don't want to see Winnipeg fall behind other cities across this country that are accessing this funding and are receiving this funding. And so we'll continue to work for a Made in Winnipeg solution, but getting access to these funds is really important, because this funding will unlock private investment funding. It'll unlock non-for-profit builders as well.
So for clarity then, based on what you've said, for residents who are concerned about, as you nodded to, the character of neighborhoods being affected, balconies overlooking, backyards, and really at the heart of it, we heard, the right to appeal something if they don't feel it's right in their neighborhood, if somebody feels like our whole street doesn't want this. Do they lose that if we make the changes the feds want to access this funding, or can people still appeal processes?
In some cases, there would be as of right. So yes, a property owner would have the right to build in accordance with the rules that we set out. And in that case, there would not be an opportunity to appeal. However, I think what's also important to remind everybody is that where changes like this have taken place, for example, in Minneapolis, the entire state of California, the change has been very gradual. There hasn't been 4-story buildings, with 4 units built, all across the cities and the communities immediately. The change has been gradual, and someone did say one of the clips we heard is that cities do change. What we're really doing, what I want us to be doing, is taking a look, Marcy, at what kind of city do we need, not just today, what do we need 20 years from now? Those are the decisions we have to make at council. We have to make long-term decisions. We need housing, our city's growing, and we need to make sure there's places for people to live.
I think a lot of people look around now and already feel like it's a problem. We see a lot of, the small house knocked down, something really tall built beside. People are already responding, and they might be looking at this as saying, wow, we already have tons of this type of building for density in Winnipeg. What does this next step mean? What kinds of things do you want further discussion on to make sure it doesn't get out of hand then? As you're saying, there's other places where it hasn't in your view, but for the Winnipeg experience, what would you say to people who have that worry or still not really trusting that this is going to be the right thing for us?
I think what residents need to have, and as do council, as does our staff and builders, we need certainty and predictability. And so we need to establish a set of rules around what can be built and where it can be built. The federal government's requirements that are imposing on us are actually in some ways fairly broad. There's not a lot of specificity. What we're trying to do right now is build in that specificity and really define what it is that can be built. What can be built on a certain lot size. Do
you see anything out there right now in Winnipeg where you're like, oh, that actually is too close to a fence or too tall or not right for this neighborhood? Or so far as mayor, when you look around, do you think that we've done okay?
I think for the most part, we're doing okay. I acknowledge this. I acknowledge that in some neighborhoods are more affected by infill than others. And I served for 8 years as a city councillor and was on the appeal committee's rotation often. I would, make decisions on these
What neighborhoods are you thinking of?
Well, I know that Councillor Mays in St. Vital has talked about certain areas that he's, been dealing with and certain areas for Councillor Orlico in River Heights. In St. James, when I was city councillor, we had some infill development that some members of the community were opposed to as well. When we look, though, at the broader need of our community, 2 things I would emphasize once again. We need housing. We need it built. And I don't want to be... We can't be leaving federal money on the table that will leverage private sector investment. We can't fall behind other cities across this country. So we will find a made in Winnipeg solution, but it's important that we say yes to these funds.
We have multi-layers of housing needs when it comes to housing as well. So I wonder about when we talk about affordable housing, rental units, we need housing in areas that have access to grocery stores. How will you make sure that this doesn't sort of snowball and add housing on paper, but it doesn't turn into developers looking to make a quick profit, tearing down houses in affluent neighborhoods, putting up fourplexes, and then they're collecting big rent checks, but it doesn't get to the heart of our affordable housing issues?
Well, a couple of things that we have to make sure we do, and we can't lose sight of what our application was. We have made an application that has to the federal government with 7 priorities, and those priorities are range, and they would ensure that 25% of what we're looking to do is to build affordable housing. And so there's 7 priorities we have. One is around affordable housing. One is around adding servicing capacity, infrastructure, wastewater capacity, for example.
Can this money flow to affordable housing?
Yes.
Okay.
This money can unlock and incentivize and encourage affordable housing. In fact, that's specifically in our application. And we have to report back to the federal government on how we're doing against our targets to get the next round of funding. So there's an obligation we have to report on meeting our targets.
How do we make sure they're not turned into Airbnbs?
Well, one of the things that we have put in place through our new short-term rental rules is, as of today, or as of February of this year, the only short-term rental you can have is in your primary residence.
Okay. So that's taken care of.
There's some grandfather clauses for those that owned Airbnbs or short-term rental units other than their primary residence prior to February. But as you know, today, if you purchased a house and you wanted to turn it into an Airbnb, you've got to live in it.
Lots more to talk about. Obviously, we'll get through this. It's still going to council. But before you go, we talked about the tree tonight. But you are also going to the Grey Cup.
Yes, very excited to be supporting our Bombers. I know Tracy was just on prior to me being on, and she's going, and it's going to be a great celebration. I know there's a lot of Winnipeg fans, of course, who will be here watching, and Grey Cup parties at home, so go Bombers.
Did you make any bets with the Montreal Mayor?
I did not make any bets with the Montreal Mayor. Mayor Sim from Vancouver had called me about the Western Final, so there is a photo of him making good on his bet, and he wore a Bomber jersey to one of his council meetings, but have not made any bets with Mayor Plante from Montreal yet.
Okay, well, we'll have to see. So I'm waiting for the mayor karaoke bet. I know you guys always do the jerseys, but I want to hear the mayor sing. So.
Maybe a future mayor.
All right, Scott Gillingham, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Marcy.
That is the mayor of the city of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham. And if you want to weigh in on what your thoughts are on the way forward for our city when it comes to increasing housing, 788-3205.